Morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Mike and Jake on LinkedIn. This is going to be a serious one. We got two big topics, but before we get into the topics, Mike, how you doing, man?
Busy. It's been a media morning. When it's like every time something gets cybered, especially when it's big stuff. A lot of media wants comments, and so starting at 7 o'clock this morning, it's been boom, 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 just interviews.
It's so funny when you say cyber. I remember when I started working with you, you're like, stop using the word cyber. I hate the word cyber, but somehow you like cybered.
That's
So it's
because
okay. So
I use it as a pejorative. That's why.
I
It's different.
think you just have to admit defeat that the world is using cyber, and so you just made it cyber to make it fit you.
Just gonna make fun of it.
All right. Enough. So usually in these we cover an array of topics. Today we have two big topics, and we're just going to cover those two big topics. The first one is the Colonial pipeline disruption. Obviously, folks know ransomware hit. Mike, they paid a $5 million ransom.
They got off cheap too. So there was a lot of negotiating going on there, and I bet the negotiating, was using language like the full weight of the United States of America is about to come crushing down on you unless we get this thing, put to bed. So, we will pay you a reasonable ransom for the decryption key, but then you better go hide under a rock. And I'm sure, because remember, Apple got extorted for 50 million. That's what the asking price was.
Yeah.
I'd be fascinated to know what the asking price was for Colonial Pipeline. I mean, this is like the huge artery of energy moving down the United States, and as soon as you tell people, there's nothing to worry about, they freak out and they go, panic buying and stuff like that. And that's exactly what happened. So
you mean the government warning not to put gasoline in plastic bags? Yeah. So but it was the Dark Side group that did it, or somebody using the Dark Side ransomware to do it. And one of the hallmarks of those attacks are they do a ton of research on their targets first, so they know how much to ask for. What do you? You're right. It hadn't even occurred to me. You're right. Like $5 million. So what do you think the original ask was?
Well, I think it was probably closer to 50 or something like that, but that's neither here nor there. Because remember, Dark Side, the ransomware gang, they do ransomware as a service. Okay. That means there was a buyer. And so some buyer, we don't know this for sure, but did some buyer pick the oil and gas sector out of the herd and say, here's what we want to go after? Who was the buyer? And, if you think about it, in Russia, right, we say this is a Russian gang. In Russia, the GRU and the SRV, do you think they don't know? Those are highly equipped intelligence agencies. Do you think they don't know what their criminal gangs are doing? So, it kind of begs the question, not only who was the buyer, but if it walks like a cutout and it quacks like a cutout, maybe it's a cutout. You know what I mean?
Or a duck.
Or a duck. Could be a duck.
And I'm sure when it happened, the people in charge of Colonial yelled something that rhymes with duck. So I think that's good. So we're going to get to the executive order in 1 second. One more question for you about the Colonial pipeline. I mean, forgive me for the question, but isn't it bad that they just showed the gangs that they'll pay $5 million? I mean, I know it was probably negotiated down, but like, this isn't $30,000. This isn't $40,000. This gang just made $5 million, right?
Yeah. I don't know that we will ever know what the original ask was. And I do think that the negotiations in part had to do with, you guys need to escape with your skins. But remember too, it's likely there was an insurance company involved, and the insurance company, being the payer, really had a dog in the fight here as to how these negotiations went, and whether or not the ransom got paid at all. And when you do the business analysis of how much money you are losing per minute, and how much it's going to cost to rebuild everything from scratch versus what can we negotiate this group down to, that's probably how this thing went down, and the insurance company was probably leading these negotiations. Another interesting thing about this was just how completely opaque it's been the whole time. And it's been reported, I read this morning, when they got whacked, when Colonial got whacked, they did not call DHS. They didn't raise their hand. It's like, okay, we'll deal with this with our insurance company. Well, come on, you guys. You're not a Baskin Robbins ice cream store. You mean more than your ordinary private sector, small medium business. That you are adjacent to the energy sector. So, I think somebody at Colonial is probably going to get beat up for that.
Yeah, well, and speaking of things that Colonial is going to get beat up for, one of the reports says they had no internal monitoring. So they had good protections, but no monitoring, and I'll leave that right there because, hey, Colonial, if you want somebody to do that, give CI a call. Now, the Baskin Robbins comment is important because my local Baskin Robbins closed in the pandemic, and my kids are a little sad about that. So we bought an ice cream maker. I just want to put that out there too. It's not connected to the internet. So Mike, you cannot hack the ice cream being made in my house. Biden executive order.
Mm-hmm.
It's long.
It's
bigger than anything in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You read it.
I have.
Tell us what we need to know.
So most of it is extremely straightforward because in an executive order, the president can direct federal agencies to paint the White House green if he wants. They're telling federal agencies, improve your detection capabilities, implement EDR, right? Endpoint Detection and Response. So that's that, along with do vulnerability management and incident response consistently across agencies. All right. So what that's doing, those two things right there, that is to address the impact of a cyber event. Okay. Put out that little fire before it gets big. Okay. That's what, the whole thing about managing incidents and, improving your detection. The parts about, managing vulnerabilities and, improving your logging so that we, do have stuff. A lot of that is to, continue to harden federal agencies, right? Technology modernization, because they have old technology in there and they want to get it. So they're telling them, use the cloud as much as you can, use SaaS applications. That's where they're trying to make sure that they, reduce the likelihood of these events in the first place. But then they're making sure that they're saying, make sure that you're tooled up to put out a little fire before it gets big. So all that stuff, hugely straightforward. They can do that. Not a problem. There's two parts in this EO, though, that are a little stickier. And there's probably some fistfights that are going to come about this. And the first one is the part about removing barriers to information sharing. And the wording in here is something to really pay attention to, because what they talk about are service providers to the federal government, service providers that are contracted by federal agencies. So, on the short end, if what they're talking about is our managed IT, SAIC or whoever does, IT for the federal government, yeah, they got to make sure that they log things properly, that if asked to turn over data for an investigation, they do that. But what it says is service providers that are contracted by federal agencies. Does that mean Verizon? Does that mean AT&T? Are they going to be asked to participate in investigations at the whim of the federal government? And what constitutes the type of investigation that they will be required to participate in? And very interestingly, the EO is calling for certain stakeholders to develop the rules of the road here. And the stakeholders that are going to do this, you can read in here, it's the DoD and the NSA. Now, the NSA does not have the ability to surveil domestically, but they're being given a seat at the table to help devise the rules on how domestic data will be turned over for investigation. That is something to watch. Eventually, what they want to do is, change the federal acquisition requirements and, make these mandates for anything that the federal government buys in terms of service providers. And when they try to change the FAR, right, federal acquisition requirements, they have to open that up for comments. That's when the fireworks are going to start.
Well, I mean, there was a proposal like this before, and it got stalled in Congress because Congress said, whoa, government overreach, right? Let these companies do,
Congress is going to say that again. Congress is going to say that again. But realize this is not regulatory. This is saying, if you meet these requirements, we will buy from you. And the converse is also true. So if you're using market forces and the power of the purse to do this, right, it just becomes a competitive differentiator for companies that want federal business. And if you give capitalists a way to make more money, they will take that up. So it's likely that positioning it this way, and this is kind of pivoting off the CMMC program a little bit, they are completely able to do this. There's nothing wrong with this because this is not onerous regulation. Everybody can say, I'm not going to do that. And then they just can't sell to the federal government. So yeah, Congress is going to howl about this. And yeah, every time Congress has tried it, it's fallen down because everybody's got to agree on something and there's no decider. Well, a decider just decided, we have to do something about this stuff and just shot, a volley over the bow here, and now we're all going to talk about this.
Yeah, but one of the problems here is so they created the Cyber Safety Review Board, which is like the NTSB. After a plane crash, there's a review board of what happened after a big cyber incident. And it does, by the way, it doesn't say how big, right? Like some cyber incident, there's going to be a review board, obviously one that involves the federal government. This review board's going to come in, what teeth does the review board have?
So the way I read it, and what they're calling it is a UCG, right? A Unified Coordination Group. That language is lifted directly from NIMS, the National Incident Management System. And so this UCG is basically, you can think of this as an incident governance team. So, and that's the way we do it here, right? If there is an incident here, the first thing we do is we create a governance team. That's kind of a standing team. And they look at what's going on, designate the response team, and has the response team report back up what's going on regular intervals. And this is NIMS. This is straight up like, in EOC, and Emergency Operations Center. This is the way it operates, right? When fire gets to the scene there, the incident commander is the first person on the scene, and then there's rules on how that command is transitioned, things like this. This is part of that. So I don't see this as much of a change with respect to the way things are done now. It's just using the same methodologies and applying them to this particular problem set.
So
there is one other place though that's where this is, I think, going to be problematic, and this is the one that we have all been expecting. And that's the software supply chain stuff. Got any questions about that?
Do I have any questions about that? Well, I mean, we've talked about this for healthcare, but what did we decide? It was 72%, 75% of all healthcare breaches came through third parties,
right? But so this takes that up a notch. I mean, several notches, because what this says is, develop and issue guidance on supply chain security. Okay, NIST, develop some standards for us. Okay, very straightforward. But what they eventually want from this is the equivalent of a bill of lading, so that technology products can map their components all the way back, and they understand every piece of code and every piece of open source that they have implemented in their product, right? So the SSL library, which is open source, they have to make sure that they monitor changes to that and make sure that they understand anything with security implications, because by extension, it applies to them, right? And this is all because when you read software supply chain security, you can insert the word SolarWinds and know exactly, what's going on here and where this came from.
But I want to ask about that. So, I read this and I don't know that it would have prevented the SolarWinds attack. Would it have?
Well, so there are no standards that have been developed. We don't know. NIST has to do their thing first, and they're going to come up with procedures to say, here's, we want you to monitor all the components of your software. Here are testing regimens we'd like to see. And here's the seal of approval we will put on your product if you meet all of these standards. So if NIST develops something that is implementable, it can work. We don't know what that looks like yet. You're on mute, man.
I'm on mute. Shoot.
Oh, man.
Actually,
Jake.
Actually, my internet blipped in the middle of you talking. And
no, it didn't.
Mute button. It did.
Like a neutrino hit your computer. Come on.
Yeah, it was the lightning on this sunny day in the Pacific Northwest. That's what I blame. So, I've seen this in so many places, and it's even in the New York Times article, which is okay, but there's nothing that immediately says in this executive order, we're going to do this today that would prevent the SolarWinds attack. That would prevent the, actually, it might have prevented or might have stopped the pipeline thing, even though that's not federal government, because it would have mandated some internal monitoring, right?
Well, yeah. Well, yes. The monitoring parts of this apply to federal agencies.
No, I know. I'm mixing the two, and I shouldn't. But actually, let's talk about that. So, talk about the monitoring that they now have to do, followed by the executive order. What?
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting because there's a couple of parts to this, and I think this is going to create a little bit of let's call it interagency fist fighting. Because when they say they want federal agencies to improve detection, remember they have a program now called CDM, Continuous Diagnostic Monitoring. So that's the federal government's way of scanning for vulnerabilities and making sure that things get patched and upgraded, on a schedule. And the GAO is constantly howling at federal agencies for not getting that stuff done. And so one of the things they're going to do here is they want federal agencies to all open up their networks and let CISA do this scanning for them. This is the way I read this. And so if CISA is in there scanning, that means there is another agency in your agency that is, looking at your work continuously. And so there's going to be a little consternation around that. And then the bigger thing is they want to allow CISA to do threat hunting in your agencies, which means they're going to be actively looking for things, not just waiting for some alert to go off. And so federal agencies are going to probably take issue with Department of Homeland Security and they're surfing around their network data. So yeah, they want them to improve detection. They want to let the agency that is best equipped to do that be the one that does that, rather than just setting standards and saying, okay, all agencies do it this way, because they haven't been doing it.
And then when something bad happens, what about logs?
Well, and they're also saying that, especially for service providers, they have to make sure that they collect the logs that are going to be needed for investigations, that they preserve them appropriately, and they make them available on request. So, if all those things happen, all of a sudden there's a lot of telemetry in there to be able to, manage impact. When a little fire breaks out, you can put it out really quickly. And so this is probably a good thing, but I do think that there's going to be some argument among federal agencies as to the extent to which access to their networks is given to Homeland Security CISA.
Yikes. Well, all right. It looks like our time is up here. I do need to tell folks one thing, which is we have a webinar planned later today with the awesome CIO of Issaquah, Washington, to talk about how to budget, how to improve, how to take your budget and make it work so you can improve your security for municipalities,
Right.
which all of a sudden is real. I mean, it's always been important, but with
Did
all
you
of
see
this
that
federal stuff going.
Speaking of local governments, did you see that there's a new bill, and one of the co-sponsors is Derek Kilmer, my congressman,
Oh, no, I
um,
didn't see that.
creating a $500 million grant program for local government, not state and local government, local government. So I got to dig into that some more today, but that sounds not only like a great idea, but it's really timely.
Right. I mean, I guess that is an important thing here is, the federal government is doing all these things, wouldn't it be great if local governments could also get some resources to take some of these actions, to be able to take some of these actions, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, local government means more to me, than state government or federal government, because, they provide the services that are critical at the scale I live my life.
Right.
I need 911 to be there.
Yeah, but you also need gas, but it's not. It's just only connected because of the timeliness of these two things. Yeah. So, all right. Well, and there have been comments in the comment section here about Deborah saying in Russia gangs are the government, and Steven saying I haven't seen this one before. A great book called Outlaws Inc. talks about Lloyd's paying ransom to Somali pirates by dropping large boxes of money in the ocean for pickup. There's probably a lot more paying of ransom than we'll ever know. Oh,
true. Yep, totally agree.
Okay, well. Usually we end these with a kicker or something funny at the end. I don't have anything. I got nothing. This is yeah. But hey, come to the webinar we're having today. I put the link in the chat. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Mike, have a good day. And hey, thanks for going through the 8,000 pages of the executive order. How many?
At 6:30 this morning.
At 6:30 this morning. Well, it's 5 p.m. somewhere. All right, everybody. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.